Hey, what's up? Welcome to Project Freelance. My name is Kay Anagonio, and I am a freelance photographer, videographer, drone pilot, podcaster, editor. I do a lot of things. I'm a musician as well. But this is Project Freelance, the show all about freelancing, where I, or a guest, or both of us, bring you guys, the audience, tips and tricks on how to grow your freelance business, no matter what it is you do, whether you are a visual creative or a website designer or a virtual assistant, whatever it is that you do. This is Project Freelance. Welcome to the show. Let's jump in. So what's up, guys? Happy Monday, the start of the work week. Unless you're like me, where your Mondays actually start at about 1:45 p.m. when people start hitting you up via email about things they need that week. It's usually how my Mondays go. But my name is Kay, and I am very excited to have you guys here with me this week. My guest is awesome. His name is Sid Ceaser, and he actually hit me up through Threads, which, by the way, I didn't know Threads could actually be useful. I've had it since it came out, since it started, and I've kind of used it sparsely because I didn't really see a lot of engagement at the beginning. But I made a post, and I tagged photographers of Threads, and I said, hey, I have a podcast called Project Freelance, and I would love to have more creatives on the podcast. And I had a bunch of people hit me up, including Sid. So this week, I have Sid Ceaser on the podcast, and he's going to be sharing with you guys and me his story about how he got into photography, started with film photography, and then went digital, but still shoots film because that's his passion, and he loves it. I'm very excited to talk to him about film photography since I am just getting into it myself. I feel like I didn't get the opportunity to do that in school, which we will actually talk about here on the podcast a little bit later. And we talk about him having a photo studio and what he's learned along the way, the mistakes he's made, and the challenges he's faced, as well as a lot of really good tips and tricks for you guys if you are trying to get into photography, or if you are an established photographer, some things that you might not have thought about before that you will now think about, thanks to Sid. So this is Project Freelance. Let's get into the show. Sid, welcome to the podcast. Please introduce yourself and what it is that you do to the Project Freelance audience.
Awesome. So my name is Sid Ceaser. I am a commercial portrait photographer based out of Nashua, New Hampshire. I primarily do headshots for businesses and corporations and musicians and stuff. And then prior to COVID, I did a lot with musicians working for promotional and press kit and publicity and CD and album and packaging and artwork and stuff like that. I don't like doing live music, but I like getting them either in the studio or outside on location. And we make pretty pictures for posters and all kinds of good stuff like that. And then like my personal work is like I'm obsessed with pop culture. So video games and movies and toys and anime and comic books and video games and just all kinds of stuff. So like I collect action figures, so I like to shoot them as if I was shooting real people. So whether it's a real person or a fake person or a piece of plastic that looks like a person, for me, I have to have something that looks like a person in front of my lens.
Do you do like cosplayers as well, or do you?
I haven't. Like a decade ago, I started to reach out to cosplayers. But it's a very tight-knit, protective community. Right. So I got a lot of people that were like, "Oh, well, we don't really know who you are," and stuff. So I haven't really. I've done some assignment works. I work for. I do assignment photography as well. Every once in a while, like there's a comic book store. It's a couple of towns over, and they have a lot of the employees that dress up in cosplay, and then they'll go to like the local ball games to entertain the kids and stuff like that. So they did a cover feature a couple of years ago, and they came to the studio, and we did a bunch of stuff. And so every once in a while, and I've got a kid like I used to be big into Halo, and so this kid made a whole Master Chief outfit out of like folded cardboard or something, and so I dragged him outside and we did a whole location shoot with him and stuff like that. But yeah, like I've got Wolverine claws and I've got lightsabers hanging on the walls, and I'm just basically if I shave my beard off, I'm just like a big fat 12-year-old.
I think we're all just trying to make our inner child happy at the end of the day. I mean, yeah. I love, I cosplay as Spider-Man. It's just something I've done for years. And the background is basically I went to a bunch of photography meetups in Los Angeles when I lived in California, and started seeing, all kinds of people, cosplayers, fire breathers, people with hot rods, like, all kinds of stuff. They would just like descend on Los Angeles, and we'd take over the streets basically and shoot photos of all kinds of different stuff, and that's kind of
awesome.
how I cut my teeth in like real environmental portrait photography myself. But for you, how'd you get started in photography? What made you pick up a camera?
So I've got a picture of me when I was about 8. I think it was like in the early 80s of me holding a Polaroid. And so my uncle had brought over a Polaroid camera. And that was really the first time I had ever seen, like, took a picture of me and he handed it to me. And all of a sudden I watched this photo of me, like, just magically appear. And I was like, oh my God. So he gave me that. And then I used to go out in the backyard and I would set up all my toys and little battles. And then I would take Polaroids of it and everything. And then it just progressed. You know, it was just like I graduated high school in 1993. And then I just sort of, the next decade, I worked at every record store in the area, but I was constantly making mixtapes, and I was designing like jacket artwork for all the mixtapes and everything. And then late 1999, early 2000, I figured it was time to buckle down and sort of go back to school. So I went to the New Hampshire Institute of Art, and I got a 4-year degree in fine art photography. And it was that summer that I graduated, 2004, was right when everything started to switch over to digital. Yeah. So I graduated and I had just tons of film stuff, and I got my first studio and I did my first headshot, and they were like, okay, so what's the protocol? And I'm like, all right, well, I got to develop a film and I got to make contact sheets and then I'll get them to you and da-da-da. And he's looking at me while I'm saying this, and he's like, I wanted I think they call it a digital file. And I was kind of hoping that I could have it before I left today. So all the film equipment went in the closet, and all of a sudden I was relearning. I was learning about monitor calibrations and printer profiles and setting up. I'm like, oh my God. So it's good. So it's nice because I've sort of got both of these, what do you call it? Things going on. Yeah. So I can do film, and like when I'm working with bands and stuff, once we know we've got the session down, then I'll bust out some film and I'll be like, all right, just indulge me for about 25 minutes. Let me get it burned through a roll, because it's my roots. So it's a little, and commercial. I love digital for commercial because it's just so fast. It's a little too fast.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes
you don't have time to like really think about making photos.
Yes.
You're just taking them.
Yeah. And like I'll sit on the images for multiple days. You know, I'll do an initial pass and I'll mark off the ones I think look pretty good. But then I'll wait for 3 or 4 days, and then I'll come back to fresh eyes. But just that inherent need where everybody was just like, I want this now. I think I was born at the wrong time. I'm like, ideally for me, like my dream projects would be like back in the 70s, when it's like, okay, you know what, we're gonna fly you out to Robert Redford's ranch for like 4 days or 5 days. Just spend the week with him, develop a rapport, get to know him, and then come back with, you know, a body of work or something that'll be used. So for me, I'm always like, you know, like my headshots, I keep them really loosey-goosey. I'm like, the only thing I ask is don't plan on scheduling anything that butts up against the rear of our session, because the minute I see somebody start looking at their watch, I know I've started to lost them. And I like to gab, so they'll come in and we gab a little bit and we shoot a little bit and we gab a little bit and keep gabbing. So I always keep everything really just open so that we don't feel rushed on anything, no matter what the shoot is.
Yeah, a hard out is definitely difficult when you're trying to be creative.
Right.
You know, and you're trying to build that relationship. You're capturing someone's soul. You know what I mean? Like you got to kind of build that relationship with them. It's interesting, like hearing your perspective going from film to digital. So I started photography in like 2011, and I was living overseas and started studying film in Dubai, and then ended up moving to Australia. And my last project for film, like my film school, was supposed to be shot on film, like a short film shot on film. But because I lived in Perth, Western Australia, in order to get that film developed, it would just cost so much. And the reason they really said no, that we're just doing digital, is because the year before us, they did their project on film, sent it off, and somewhere in transit, it wasn't refrigerated. So the film just got destroyed, and they were like, well, we lost that whole project. So it's not worth it to them to do it, basically. And so I never got to learn film, but I did recently. I traveled to Greece and picked up this little guy right here.
Very nice, very nice.
Little film camera over there. And the story behind that camera is actually crazy. I guess during the Cold War era, the Soviets took over part of Ukraine and moved their camera manufacturing to Ukraine, and so this is one of those cameras.
Oh,
so
nice!
It's just cool that these older pieces have like history to them, unlike Sony or Canon or Nikon. You know, like old film cameras like have a story and a history. And I know a bunch of people, like a friend of mine, her grandfather was in World War II and he was a war photographer, and so like his camera, like that thing's seen some stuff. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So,
I posted on Threads the other day. I'm a big flea market junkie, and we had just gone 2 weeks ago. We went to a flea market, and a woman had a cigar box, and I opened it up, and it was full of metal Kodak tins. And I don't think she knew what was in it. So I bought them, and then when I got back to the car, I pulled them out. I opened one up, and there was a roll of developed film in there, and I'm like, "What?" So I opened all of them up, and there was developed rolls in every single one. And I pulled them out, and I started holding them up to the sky, and I'm like, "Those look like army helmets." And then I'm like,
oh my God,
"There's a bunch of guys standing next to a Jeep." So I started looking at them when I got back to the studio. These are World War II images.
No way.
So all of a sudden I have this mini project where I've got to, I mean, they're super tightly wound right now. So I've got to get them in sleeves, and I've got to flatten them.
Yeah.
And then I can start scanning them in and try to figure out where are these from. So that's awesome. Yeah, I don't even know how I was going with that, but that's, and then
just the history of film photography itself.
Right?
You know,
Yes. Yeah. I've got a. It's funny you're talking about the Ukraine stuff. I've got a Helios 44-2 that's on one of my 35 millimeters that I just stuck on there, and to get that crazy out of focus garbage going on in the background and stuff. But yeah, I try to live in both worlds. Like commercial work is really nice and fast. 3 years ago, I met a guy that was local, and he goes by the business name Pictoria Graphica, and he produces dry plates for people that want to do like wet plate, but they don't want to get more into the chemicals and stuff.
Yeah.
So I was introduced to him, and we hit it off really well. So we opened in Amherst, New Hampshire. We opened a place called Photo Retro, which is originally it was going to be manufacturing for just the dry plates. But when he got in there, every room, it used to be a spa, so every room had water hookups, and he was just like, "Oh my God, I can have darkrooms in here. And if I have darkrooms in here," he's like, "we could find a community and we could rent darkroom space." So it turned into something a little bit different. So now it's like when you first go in, there's a little retail area where you can buy film and you can buy supplies. There's 2 community darkrooms that people can rent by the hour, and they come in and they can develop their film, or they can make prints, and we can do prints up to 8x10. And then the back was supposed to be manufacturing stuff, but then he actually accepted a job for LaCroix Optics, which is in Arkansas, which is where he's from. And so he moved out, and one of the part-time employees took over, and they now run Photo Retro, and then he's making lenses for Schneider and Sony and Zeiss and stuff like that. So it's like everything I try to get super involved in everything, because it's just, I mean, to me, film it's just a specific creative language. You know, be it digital or film or just whatever. So I'm just like everything. I'm a sponge. I'm like, it's got to be creative in my world. Like no matter what I do, it's got to be related somehow to creativity and creative expression.
Oh man, I love it. And so I'm recently getting into film now. You know, like I'm literally just bought some Portra 400 rolls. You know, I'm getting into it. I'm trying to figure it out. And so I actually shoot SpaceX launches down in Texas at Starbase.
Oh.
Yeah, so I'm a part of a group, and we go down there for the big Starship launches, which is the rocket that will eventually take us to Mars, right? And so the last one was the 4th test flight, and we put like 10 GoPros around the launch pad as close as we could put them, just to see our GoPros rocket proof. And
that's awesome.
Turns out GoPros are rocket proof. Well, for the most part. For the most part, some of them got absolutely obliterated.
Oh my gosh.
The footage we got is like unlike anything. Nobody has footage like this because nobody's dared to destroy their cameras.
Yes.
Like we don't. We're like it's worth it because if we get this footage, it will be historic, right?
Yes, all in the name of creativity and productivity. Yes.
Exactly. So the next launch they're doing is number 5, and they're trying to launch the rocket and then catch the booster back at the launch pad. Right. So if it succeeds, the footage is going to be insane and historic. But if it fails, it's going to explode on the launch pad, and it's going to be historic and
it's going to be amazing.
So either way,
win-win.
Yeah, either way, it's good for us, right? So we're trying to get GoPro to send us more cameras because we obviously need. We're like, let's do 20, let's do 30. How many can we put out there? So we're doing that, but we also want to start shooting film photography because we could make it look retro and like we're back in the 70s or whatever, or the 60s, 70s, and I'm super excited about that. So I've been like trying to educate myself on film and and how it works and how to use it and how to take care of it and everything. And it's just like such a rabbit hole, and like you don't want to mess it up, but the only way to learn is by doing. So I'm like, I just got to dive in and start firing off some shots. And coming from the digital background, I have to like remind myself, like, slow down. You can't take 200 photos, right? Like you have like, you know, a limited number of photos. So it's like very daunting, and like the learning curve is pretty big for me personally, but I'm excited to kind of dive further into that.
That's awesome. I used to teach a lighting, off-camera lighting workshop, and one of the things that we would do is I would watch a lot of these people that would come in and take it, and they would just fire, like, just, I mean, their fingers were just constantly on the shutter, and just So I would just take a piece of cardboard and I painted them black, and I would just gaff tape them over the back of their screen, and all of a sudden they're just like, wait a minute. I'm like, all right, you've got 12 shots.
Wow, that's a great idea.
And it helps, especially when like they're dealing with manual settings, and they're dealing with ISO, and they're dealing with shutter speed, and they're dealing with aperture. All of a sudden they can't see it, so they've got to start thinking about it. And it's like, okay, well, you know, if we've got a perfect exposure at f4 at 1/20th of a second, what happens if I change the power on my flash? Something's got to change to compensate for that. And then you can start to see, and then it's like, okay, we're not gonna check the images until everybody's done, and then we'll bring them back inside and we'll dump them, and you can see how you did. But it helps them a little bit to be like, oh, okay, so I can't just like hold my finger down and pray.
Sure.
It's a good way. It's a super cheap way. Like, just, you know, cover that screen with some gaff tape and give yourself an assignment and be like, all right,
and learn and just relearn.
Yeah, and I've got 12 shots, and that's it. And I can't look at the back of my screen.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it. It's so smart. Like, why didn't I think of that? But, you know, like conversations like this is why I love this podcast, because like not only is it helpful to other creatives, but I'm also getting an education by doing this, by hosting this podcast. So it's like the information I'm getting is so invaluable, you know, and like, so first of all, thank you for taking the time, but
absolutely.
So we went into your education background. When you were studying, did you have any internships, or did you have any mentors that you kind of looked up to in the creative world?
We went to a fine art college, which we were fighting constantly with the school, because they would be like, well, you know, you're going to a school to learn how to live your life enriched with art. And it's like, okay, well, like when I graduated, it was a small college. When I graduated in 2004, there was 6 of us. But over time, they became accredited, and then they started to bring in students from outside of the state, and the student body started to grow. So it was like, okay, well, when you've got 6 of us that are asking about like internships and practicums and all that, and, you know, you give us that answer, that's okay. But when you've got, you know, a class of 60 and they're like, look, I don't want to be working at the mall for the rest of my life. You've got to help me out. So they slowly started to integrate that kind of stuff. I was there when I didn't have an internship. But when I got out, the first thing I did was I got a studio, and then I started to look for the established shooters in the area, seeing if they need any assistance. Which, you know, like, it's interesting with digital now, you can go on the internet and you can learn on YouTube. But back then it was pretty much like either you went to a commercial place that like Hallmark, which was more commercially geared, so that when you graduated, you had all this expensive film gear and you hit the ground running because you had contacts from Hallmark. You know, or you would try to find somebody local that you could assist, and then you would be with them for multiple years.
Sure.
And then eventually they would sort of start passing small stuff off to you. So from like 2004 to like 2008, 2009, I would reach out just to the more established people in the area and just be like, you know, sometimes they were like, no, we're all set. I helped one guy who had an assistant with him for like 12 years. And I was the first person after this guy left. So like, in fact, we did a job in Kentucky. The plane ticket was still in the prior assistant's name. And it was really frustrating because he had developed a rapport with this kid for 12 years. So he would look like they could just send signals to one another, and they just knew. So he would be doing that to me. And I'm like, I don't understand.
I don't know your sign
I'm not
language,
speaking your language yet. And so he was getting really frustrated. And I was like, dude, like, you got to cut me a little slack. Like, I can learn, but I can't pick it up as, you know, just on the first gig.
Osmosis, yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, like, so that was, I always thought that was a good idea, is just reach out to the locals. And then, you know, like, I got a part-time gig as an executive director for an arts nonprofit, just so I could sort of learn about the other arts groups in the area. We had a mom and pop camera store that was in Nashville for 70 years. And so I would go in and I'd hang out. They put me on part-time. I liked it because I got to stand at the front of the counter and, inventory crap. But at the same time, I got to meet all the local shooters. They would come in, all the guys that shot for the newspapers, and they just wanted to come in and, hobnob and talk shop and everything like that. So I've also always tried to just be involved everywhere, just so that I can learn who's out there and they can learn. I mean, despite as big as it seems, the photography world is still a really, really tiny community. So it's like, just learn who's out there and just network, and don't be afraid to, like, I don't do weddings. I'm not set up for weddings. Like, the idea of shooting a wedding, I'm like, I'd pee my pants. Like, there's no way I could do it. So I have no problem, like, sending people other places, and people are always like, oh, it must be nice to turn down that kind of money. And it's like, I need the money, but that's not the path that I want to go. Like I did for personal friends, I did an engagement session one time, and I then made the mistake of putting a couple of the images up online, and all of a sudden people were like, oh my God, you're doing weddings? And it's like, no. Take those images down. You didn't see them. They don't exist. And there's lots of stuff too. Commercially, it's just, like sometimes they ask you to do things, and it's like, hey, I'll do it, but it's nothing that you're ever going to see, because it doesn't sort of fall into my wheelhouse.
Yeah.
So I've always been sort of like, it depends on who you talk to. Some people say it's good to shoot everything. Some people say it's good to kind of have a niche. I'm of I mean, it's hard to shoot everything, because it's like, how do you market everything?
Right.
So I figured, and even having sort of two niches of headshots and then music stuff, all of a sudden I've split my marketing in half. So all of a sudden I got to try to do a bunch. So that, and I went to a fine art school where they taught you to express yourself creatively, think creatively, and how to deal with art galleries, since they're sort of your proponent and they're sort of your advocate. But nothing in the term of commercial shooting and everything. So that's always been my weak point. I've always kind of been baby stepping it, just trying to figure out how it all works. And then I've always been cash and carry, so that I don't have any debt when it comes to the business. If I can't afford it, I'll wait until I can pick one up used or whatever. Yeah.
No, I just posted a video about niching, like picking a niche, and like why you should, why you shouldn't, things like that. And like, I personally am, a lot of my clients call me the Swiss Army knife of creation, because I shoot everything. I do sports, I do live music, I do conferences, I do everything. Yep. But that's because like if I niche down, it's gonna start feeling like a 9 to 5 to me, and I didn't get into this game to do a 9 to 5. That's right. what I was trying to avoid. I don't want to do the same thing every day. I like doing different shit every day. And I do photo, video, drone editing. So I do a lot. I do different things. And so I think for me, that's just the way it worked out and what I wanted to do with my path. But the last guest I had on here, he's just a wedding photographer. That's all he does, just weddings. He used to do music stuff, but he fell into weddings right at the beginning of COVID, and it just took off for him. So he just pivoted and went straight full tilt into wedding photography, and that's his jam. And I'm similar to you. I'm like, I only shoot friends' weddings, and it's on rare occasion because like I fucking can't. I just don't have the patience. I don't have the stamina, the mental wherewithal to like deal with people on their wedding day, because it is the most beautiful day of their life, but it's also the most stressful day. It
totally is. And
I'm not trying to like mess it up.
No. And like nowadays where brides get on the internet and they're like 1,001 things that you should make sure your photographer does. And it's like, get 185,000 detail shots and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, so like every once in a while I have friends that ask, and I'm just like, absolutely not. Like, I will do like
be there, but nope. Not like capacity.
If you want me to shoot anything, I'm like, wait till you guys get back from the honeymoon and you can still fit in your wedding clothes, and let's go out and do some really nice sort of editorial type stuff. Like, because I've told them, I'm just like, I don't care about receptions. Nobody looks at reception photo. Yeah. Like, I just don't care. I'd rather, when my wife and I got married, we kept it super small. We had it in a music venue. We had musicians that I had worked with. They came and they all just jammed.
Sick.
And I really didn't. One friend showed up with a couple of rolls of film and he shot, but I was just like, I just want it to be in this moment. I don't want to worry about all that crap,
Yep.
And then we also, because my wife and I, we both met at the Institute of Art.
Oh, cool.
When we did our wedding photos, we actually found, because we're both she's really into alternative processes. And I've always been into wet plate, but I just the studios that I've been in, they don't allow the chemicals and stuff.
Sure.
So we found a guy that was the foreign language chair at UNH, University of New Hampshire up in Durham. And we ended up he did a whole day with us, and he did wet plate, and he did 7 20 by 24 inch wet plates of us in sort of like our wedding.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Amazing. Like I would have for what he charged, I'm like, I would have paid that just to watch him, like,
sure.
Like, so that was kind of our thing, is that we've got these giant, wet plate images of us, and we were sort of dressed period appropriate. So it kind of looks like we were from the 1950s.
Oh, I love that. That's so
cool.
It
was kind of cool. Yeah. But that, yeah, we saved the wedding just for us and just a small group of friends and stuff like that. But, yeah.
So coming from the film world, I think you're the perfect person to ask this question to. Can you talk about the importance of printing your photography? Because most people now don't do it. And I think it's important that we do. I explore abandoned places. It's one of my side passions. I just love abandoned places and the decay and the nature growing back. And like, it just reminds me that like nature will always win at the end of the day. We can do whatever we want to this planet, but nature will always thrive in the most ridiculous conditions.
Yep.
So around my house, I've got a bunch of different photo prints of my like urban exploring adventures, basically. Because I think it's important that we have tangible like proof of like what we did in these special moments. So can you just touch on that point?
Absolutely. I was raised on film, so I was always making prints in the darkroom. I think it's important for me, it's like, I can think of like the first time I went to the MFA and I saw they had an Ansel Adams exhibition, and like like some people don't like his work and everything, but the control and the artistry he had over creating a physical print was just, like seeing it on a screen is cool and seeing it in a book is all right, but when you're staring like 7 inches away and you can get like inky blacks and you can see where it's just, I don't even know. Like for me, it's always been the stuff that you shoot, that's how you present it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to see like, for commercial shooters, they're starting to actually put books together again and starting to shop those around and bring them out. I think having a physical representation of what you can do, especially with film, because it also shows the artistry and the craft behind making a print, which is the second half of conceptual. Conceptual is great, and then you've got a binder full of negatives, and it's like, no, now is when you get in there and we're in the presentation stage where we're going to work on one print. We're going to make sure that from corner to corner, everything is going to be perfectly printed and timed and dodged and burned and everything. And that's your showpiece, because the negative it's just the negative. Like, we need to get to the print from the negative. That's how we do it. And it's interesting because when I was doing in college, we had color, we were shooting color film, and then we had a C printer, but I never responded to color the same way, because C prints, almost immediately, like they would start to fade, like just the color paper just so when I transitioned over to digital and I started learning about archival inks and archival papers and stuff, and all of a sudden my color work started to really pop, because I was just like, oh, it's gonna last, it doesn't fade, like it looks good. So I was more black and white in college, and then when I got into the digital shooting, I started doing a lot more color work, just because I knew I could make prints that were going to actually look good, and they were going to, they weren't faded, and I don't know. So I think absolutely, I think it's important to, kept making an image is good, having the negative is good, but it goes hand in hand, that, capturing and then the presentation of showing like your best stuff, and you're photographing things because you love it.
Yeah.
And I think the second step of that is, you take an image and you love that thing so much that you want to physically make a print of that and show it to people and be like, look, there's something going on here that I think everyone needs to see.
Yeah.
So absolutely. I say, check your local community colleges. A lot of them still offer intro to photography classes or intro to darkroom classes. Look for community darkrooms that are in your area that you can rent, and get in there and, start like just scanning them and showing them on Instagram is cool and all, but learning how to get in there and make a nice fiber-based print that's going to last. It's just a whole different thing, especially when you start printing really big too.
Yeah.
Oh, it's amazing.
There's a large format film photographer that I follow on Instagram, Tyler Shields, and he does these like beautiful concept photos. It's like so cool to see like the thought process that goes into these. And there's this guy I recently watched on YouTube. I can't for the life of me remember his name off the top of my head, but he had this idea to make a photo, and just watching the whole process from setting up the photo and like getting all the props and like finding the subject and like executing the whole thing, and then seeing the final printed image on his wall. You're just like, oh my God, like this is magic.
Yeah.
It's beautiful, man.
It is.
For you, like, I'd like to talk about storage. Like, what is your storage process like for these actual negatives and things like that, especially with film photography? Because I mean, we can talk about hard drives all day, but like when you've got physical like material, like how do you store this?
I mean, I've got binders. I've got a bookshelf right here that's just filled with binders from 35 up to 4x5 sheet film. Then it gets scary because like that's it. You only have one thing. Like digital, like I've got 8 different portable hard drives, and I've got one at my parents' house, and I've got 2 at home, and I've got 1 here in a fire safe. Like, so if something ever happens, at least I've got a backup. But it gets a little scary when like that's all we've got. So yeah, I've got a bookshelf, and I keep them in here, and they just kind of hang out. And, I don't have they're not in I do have a safe. But it's not big enough to hold everything that it should.
So how do you decide what goes in the safe?
Most of it's just camera equipment at the moment.
Oh, fair.
Yeah, and then at some point I'd like to, but I just haven't had a chance yet. But yeah, they're in binders, they're in sleeves, and they're nice and flat, so that if I'm ready to start scanning stuff in, I can just slide it in and scan them in and stuff.
Hell yeah.
But yeah.
It's scary when you've got physical products like that, physical like material. It's like it's a lot to like mentally wrap your head around. Like, but I mean, it's a part of it. And for the business side, how did you find your value and your worth? Like, how did you figure out what to charge people for your time? Yeah,
I looked at first. It was interesting because it was like when I got out of college, I was used to doing assignment photography. So, somebody was like, okay, for the next semester, we're going to focus on blah, 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 blah. When I graduated, all of a sudden I found I didn't have assignments and I didn't know what to do. So I was like, oh, so I started listening to other people. So my dad was just like, okay, if you want to make $1 million, you need to take pictures of people's pets. And I was like, okay, so my parents have these 2 little Shih Tzus. They brought him into the studio. Roscoe, I love him to death. But within like the first 10 minutes, he like pooped on the floor. And I'm like, all right, so I'm going to start making a mental list. I don't want to photograph anything that poops on my floor. And then my mom was like, if you want to make a lot of money, you got to take pictures of people's kids. Yep. And so I had a friend that had a 4-year-old, and we brought her into the studio, and for an hour she just ran up and down just screaming. She's like, no. And I'm like, all right, I don't want to do kids. I don't want to do things that poop on the floor. And then it was like, I walked in the studio one day, and it was like somebody just smacked me upside the head, and it was just like, listen, like, you're hardcore. Like I've got a huge music library between CDs and cassettes and albums, and it's like and I used to make mixtapes, and I would design all the little jackets, and then I was like the old cassettes that were sort of like clear, like the plastic clear ones. You could scrape off the white lettering, and I could take typewriter correction ink, and I could write the name of it. So I used to get really intricate with because I love physical things. I love the design of stuff. So all of a sudden, like, it was just like somebody smacked me, and it was like, look, you love music, you love making package designs. Why are you not working with musicians? I mean, Berkeley College is just an hour away. Like, what are you doing? So all of a sudden I was just like, oh my God. So I just started researching, and I started looking in the area about who was around here, the established photographers, what they charge. And then, I didn't want to charge what they charged until I figured I was at a point where I was really ready. And then I sort of started at a price point which was almost more than I could afford myself. And I figured that gets rid of the window shoppers. And every once in a while I still get somebody that's just like, well, your website says you start at $450. What do you offer for $100? And it's just like, I don't offer anything. Like, I offer look for somebody.
Consult, yeah.
My offer is go look on Craigslist for somebody that's shooting for $100. Because I don't want to deal, I don't want to deal with that.
There's a lot that comes with those low ballers, a lot of changes.
And it's funny too. eventually I started getting into larger and larger corporations. And the scary thing about larger and larger corporations is just asking for the money. Like, it's just saying, okay, this job, I know what it entails. I've spent enough time over the last 20 years, running into issues with clients and knowing, scope creep and how like things creep up and all that kind of stuff. So that, if I quote 17,000, like that's the scariest thing, is throwing that number out. And either they can say sounds good, or they can say, well, we're taking other bids, or, but at least you start to establish your rates and you feel good about it. I'm from a fine art college where it's like, people ask, like, it's bad enough that a fine art college, like, it makes you feel like you should be ashamed of what you do. Just like, well, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a photographer. And they're like, oh, how's that working out for you? And it's like, I'm sorry. So you have to get past that thing, and I used to be really worried about, like, oh my God, what if people don't like my work, and blah, 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 blah. And then at some point I'm like, you know what, screw it. You don't like my work? That's awesome. Like, not everybody has to like my work. I'm just going for my tribe that responds to my work. The first thing I always say I don't shoot a lot of like high school portraits, like high school seniors and stuff. Every once in a while, somebody will email me asking about that kind of stuff. And I'll be like, okay, first of all, take a look at the work on the website. If you haven't taken a look at the work on the website, do that before we discuss anymore, because I want somebody that, they get to my page and they look at my work and they're just like, oh, it's so like good, or I had an opera singer one time, and she was just like, she called me and she was just like, I did a Google search and I found all these photographers. She's like, and I went through all of these, and then she's like, I got to your page, and all of a sudden I was like, he gets it. And I'm like, all right, it could be few and far between, but that's awesome. And I have to just not worry about all the people that don't like it, and because there's going to be a lot of people that like it. So for pricing and everything, I just baby stepped everything until I got to the point where I'm just like, okay, I know what goes into a certain type of shoot. I know the hours involved in processing, and I'm a low volume shooter. So like when I'm dealing with musicians, or like when I'm dealing with headshots, usually musicians, they're going to end up getting maybe 5 to 7 images delivered. Or with a headshot, usually it used to be 1, I've upped it to 2. So for the price, includes the session, and then you're going to get 2 images you picked. I process them, I do color, I do black and white. You're going to get those. So I'm not like, and like I used to do high school yearbook photography, like for seniors and everything. And you get into the location with their mom, and their moms start counting all the frames that you take, and you give them a small proof set, and she's like, I know you shot a lot more than, and it's just like, no. And so you learn, like, I've started to learn little tricks, like, even though I'm shooting raw, but the image that shows up on the back of your camera is like that embedded JPEG. So I'll set it to black and white. And if I know there's an image that's just going to kick ass in black and white, I set the JPEG to black and white. I show them, I get them all excited. And then that way, if the mother says, oh, well, do you have that in color? And it's like, nope, I shot it in black and white and I showed you. We were committed to that. Like, that's all you're going to get, just black and white. That's the only way I shot it. And it's like, and that is, again, and it's like you start making mental notes. And it's like, all right, you know what? I don't want someone staring over my shoulder. Like, I don't want parents standing over my shoulder. Commercial work, it's a little different because you've usually got a creative director and they're like right over your shoulder, breathing down your neck, and you want to see exactly what's going on. But for pricing, I would say just the most important thing is you've got to crunch the numbers. You've got to sort of figure. That's the thing. It's like, well, where do you start? And it's like, you got to sit down and you got to list out all your expenses, and like, I've got a studio, so not only do I have to pay my apartment rent, then I got to pay all my studio related things too. And then that's where you start to figure out the cost of doing business. That's, and you can go to like the, the ASMP website, where you can download a form that basically it says, fill out all this information of what you pay every month for expenses. And then it shows you how you basically get into the ballpark of what you need just to get out of the door, and that, again, that's the hardest thing, is like, people will call and it's like, okay, like, my day rate starts at $2,500, and they're just like, oh, and it's like, that's
sorry.
I did the numbers. That's what, I got my car payment and I got my and so that gets difficult, because it's like, a lot of people, that's not what they want to hear. In 2008, the old mill building that I used to be in, when everybody lost their jobs, like, I moved into this old mill building in 2004. There was me, and then there was a woman that was trying to run a photo gallery place. Everybody lost their job in 2008. And at one point, the Picker building had 12 photographers, because dudes were like, well, I lost my job. I got a camera. I can totally do this. And they move in, And I've had like, I had dudes that would come up to my studio and they're like, I don't get it. I've been here 30 days and I'm not completely booked. And it's just like, this is a long-term thing. Like, this is not an overnight thing, like you can pretend you're the rock star and everything and like, but you got to establish stuff. It's going to take a long time. Or they get in and they're like, oh my God, now I have a studio rent and I have to have studio insurance and I have to have, internet and I have to blah, 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 blah. And so very quickly they're just like, I think I'm just going to become a location natural light photographer so I don't have to deal with any of this crap.
Yeah.
So I can't think of doing anything else, but at some point I'm like, like when tax time rolls around, it's just like, all right, like I love what I do. I love the fact that everything in my studio I made with somebody else. Cause for me, portrait photography is an organic process. But it's also a business, and it's just, I've kind of figured out how to make the business work so that I can keep doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A point you brought up is like that it is a long-term thing. Like people try to get into the game. I have somebody in my circle right now that's actually trying to get into videography, and he's very quickly learning how much time it takes to edit things. And when you don't know anything about editing, you have to learn how to edit. And then clients ask for revisions, so you have to go back and edit again. And you've got to learn how to charge for those things, charge hourly on editing or whatever it is per revision, whatever. And he's very quickly like getting frustrated. Like, why do I have to keep doing this? Like, why am I not, like you were saying about that photographer that was in the studio, like, why am I not completely booked? I've been doing this for 30 days. And I'm like, bro, I've been doing this for 10 years and I'm not completely booked. Like, what do you mean, bro? Yeah. It's not like you haven't built anything yet. Nobody knows who you are,
Exactly.
So you've got to build that rapport. You've got to network. You've got to like find people in the community. You've got to put the legwork in to build a business. You can't just like, with any business, you can't expect to just overnight success. It doesn't exist. It's not real. Right. It's a farce.
Yeah. And eventually you get to the point where, all of a sudden people start recognizing your name, or they, you start shooting for a magazine or something and they start seeing your name repeatedly, so that all of a sudden when it pops up in Google or whatever, they're like, oh, okay. Like he shoots for the Hippo, or he did the headshots for so-and-so and everything. And that takes time. And when you get frustrated, it's like at the same time while you're trying to figure that all out, don't forget to just shoot for yourself.
Correct.
Like, everything I do, like I'm shooting for myself as well as for the client. So, it has to agree with my sensibilities before it agrees with them. And if they're, and that's why I always make sure that like, the people that want to work with me, I make sure they go through my website and I'm like, this is my style. If you don't respond to that, that's not a problem. Like I can give you a list of other people that are in the area who you might respond to more. But, like you've got to shoot, you've got to, because otherwise that's when it starts to feel like you're just punching a ticket. It's just like funneling them through and doing all that. It's like, terrible.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to start a new segment on the podcast where I have my previous guest ask the next guest a question, not knowing who it is.
Oh my God.
Very fun. Very fun. So before I ask for yours, so think about that. I'm going to have you ask my next guest a question. But my previous guest, Jordan Repke, his question for you is, what is one thing that if you did would be amazing for your business, but you just can't bring yourself to do it?
Investing money into like aggressive marketing. I try to baby step everything, and I think that, that's my Achilles heel is I get overwhelmed and I get scared, because the thought of hiring someone else to help, which is what I should be doing, like hopefully I can get to the point someday where, I can take half of what I make and give it to somebody who can take care of all that other stuff. But the thought of that, I'm sort of my own worst enemy when it comes to, I need the people that I work with and the community around me, I need them to be genuine and sincere. And, like I used to go to networking events and I was just like, why? Like, I can't do this. Like you get around all these people that, like work in insurance, and you can tell that they just do their thing. And you're like, you try to get into a conversation with them and they're just, they're not into it. And then I start to get like repulsed, I'm just like, I can't, like, I don't want to play this game. Like so that is, I guess it's more of a personal thing where it's just like, I'm not as open to sort of the established ways of networking and marketing, which, makes me kind of sound like a curmudgeon or a grump or whatever. But, like when I was doing, like, I was doing fine artwork and I had like a gallery show one time. And we were doing these really large images of toys and stuff, and it was a toy themed exhibit, which was awesome.
Cool.
But I went to like the opening reception after party where the artists were there, and it was the same thing. I got surrounded by these other 4 people, and they were trying to outdo who knows who, and I was just like, I just want to talk about like how awesome toys are and how awesome anime is and like what inspired you to take vacuum cleaners and make them look like robots and spaceships. And all they wanted to do was, and it was just like, I can't do it. So I don't know if that's, like the fear of being grown up or if it's just the fear of wanting a sincerity to the people that I work with. So that has a tendency, like, there are people in the community that I would love to do work for, but we don't exactly rub the right way. Yeah. So I would say probably that. Yeah. And then like I get, there's other things that I really want to do. Like I'm a huge Jim Henson fan. I love puppets. I have a puppet of me right there. And I did some puppet stuff, in the past. And I get nervous because it's like, why is some almost 50-year-old dude like playing with puppets and videos and everything? And my whole thing is just like, you know what? We're only here for a certain amount of time. Like you're here and then you're dead. So if you don't celebrate the crap that you love, what's the point? Like, what's the point? So there's a lot of little things that I would like to try to do. One, I can't concentrate. And I think where film has always taught me to slow down. Yeah. Digital has got me to that point now where I'm like, I have an idea, and if I can't execute it by tomorrow, I'm just going to move on and do something else. And so that, like, I have a list of things that I want to do, and the shit never happens because it's so involving. Now I'm just completely, I don't even know where I'm going with that. But I would say marketing. And then like on the other side of that, I would also say, like, everybody's always asking me, like, well, how do you find your style? And it's like, don't fucking worry about your style.
Yeah, it'll find you.
Shoot the shit that you love and share it. And that could be cats, it could be thimbles, it could be whatever, toys, puppets, whatever. Like, everyone's always like trying to figure out like, well, what works and what attracts people and everything, but they don't look inside themselves, and it's just like, you are the only you that will ever exist, and you have so many incredible things that you are passionate about and that you love. Figuring out how to incorporate all of that stuff into what you do, like, it just makes sense. But everyone's always worried about like, well, like, I want to shoot like this person, or how do I get clients like Chase Jarvis, or and it's just like, just incorporate you have to incorporate you were the brand, you were the business, and be nice. Like, just, like Dalton from Roadhouse, like, just be nice. I know so many. We had a guy that moved into our old building one time. He went to Hallmark. He was like banging on stuff. Like, he was one floor below me and he was banging on stuff. So we went down. We were going to have an open house for everybody. I went in with a flyer, and I was just like, he opens the door and he was just like, why are you bothering me? And I was like, hey man, welcome to the neighborhood. How you doing? Like, we've got an open house coming up and everything. And like, he takes the piece of paper and he's just like, really? This is what you bother? And I'm like, all right, you know what? Good luck. Welcome to the neighborhood. And then like, when like, you just don't, like, if you're hanging out your shingle as a business, like, as much as it's about shooting, it's also about personality, and it's about being able to communicate and manage expectations and all that kind of stuff. But like don't be a dick. Like, just be yourself, be genuine. Like, I don't even know. I just be a good person. Don't be, because as large as the photography community is, it's also really tiny.
Very
so,
small.
Don't worry about what other, what you should be doing is not bad talking other people's work. we're all, you know, like, what is it? Even tide lifts all boats. Like, we're all in this together. Help people out, help your, you know, fellow shooters out, recommend stuff if you can. We're all in this together. It's not like each person is doing this for trying to survive on their own. Like, there's a community. And when you have your tribe, it makes everything, you know, so much better.
I agree. Do you have a question to ask my next guest?
Oh my God. What has been the hardest learning curve? What has been the hardest learning curve in relation to those that want to do this as a profession? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Kind of, sort
of.
of.
Yeah. Can you answer the question for yourself? What's been your
fear
learning curve?
Fear. Even now, like when I was in high school, when I was in grade school, like I was so shy. Like I couldn't even go up to the counter at McDonald's and order something. Like I couldn't. I don't know what it was. And then it wasn't until it was my senior year when I got into the art wing at my high school. And I could have got in earlier, but I had a guidance counselor that had like looked at my portfolio, and he was like, maybe we should let the seniors take priority. And I was just like, what are you doing? And so I got in their senior year, and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like my people, and they understand. And then it also was like, I could be a goof off and I could start to make people laugh. And I was like, oh, this is okay. This is going to help.
Yeah.
And so it's just been a process. And now, you know, it's at some point, again, at some point you're just like, I don't care anymore. Like, I don't care if you think I'm immature. I don't care, you know, whatever. So yeah, that's always been the hardest thing is just, you know, like there's times where I want to come in here and all I want to do is just set fire to everything in this studio. And my wife, God love her, I mean, she can see further down the road than I can. And she's just like, shut up, go have a glass of milk, calm down. She's just like, you know, people know you. She's like, people like you. She's just like, you're doing good stuff. People know your name. She's like, just, that's part of this. Like the self-doubt and the just scared
Imposter
of everything.
Syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
And you know, like, and as far as the style, like, don't even worry. Just you shoot and you shoot and you shoot and you shoot and other people find your style. It's not you. It's when other people start to call you and they're like, "Oh, I was on your website and I really like your style of work."
Yeah.
And you're like, "Oh my, wait, what?
You're
what?
like my what?
I have a what?" You know, and it's just it's the creative lobe in your brain. It's the instinct that you bring. So, you know, once you sort of get I'm always a big proponent on really locking in the technical stuff. So your apertures and your shutter speeds and all that, so that it gets to the point where you don't have to think about that anymore. And that's when the real creativity starts, because you're on autopilot and you're sort of in the zone. Lost my train of thought because I'm an old man.
No, it's important to get past that fear point, you know, of like, not feeling like you're good enough or not feeling like your work is good enough or anything like that. Like, it's so important to like push through that, you know, like if you're afraid of, I think it was Robin Williams that said it. If you're afraid to do something, do it.
Right. Exactly. Just jump.
Just do it.
I
think it's important to do that. And then my last question for you is, what is something you know now that you wish you knew when you started all of this?
Communication. 100% communication. You've got to, as much as it's shooting, it's, you know, I almost over communicate with clients when they come in, because I walk them through everything that I'm doing, because I want them, you know, like I've got junk all over the studio so that when they walk in, a lot of times I get, you know, headshots from like HR. It's like, okay, Bob, we've scheduled you to go get your headshot in Nashua done and everything. So they don't know what they're about to walk into. So I try to make it as relaxing as possible. So they come in and they're like, oh, all right, he's got puppets and he's got records and he's got toys and he's got posters. Like, I'm not a threat. So that's the first thing. And then I'll walk them through everything. And I'm just like, all right, you know what? This is my primary light. I'm going to have my background lights. I'm going to pop them a couple of times and make sure they're doing what's supposed to be doing. Just hang out here for 10 minutes. I'm just going to take a couple of test shots and make sure that everything is firing on all cylinders. And I just, because the minute you stop talking to them is when they start to get nervous.
Exactly.
And it's like, and I get it, because it's just like, you're standing there and I've got this thing in front of my face. And, you know, like, especially with females that come into the studio, like the longer I'm not talking to them and the longer I've got this thing up to my eyeballs, I don't know what they're starting to think, and I'm focusing and recomposing, but am I looking too long, and I don't want them to worry about that. So I walk them through the whole process, as I'm a center point focus guy. So I'll focus on their eyeballs and I'll tell them, I'm like, okay, I got your eye on focus and I'm going to recompose. So if you see the camera like start to go down a little bit, I'm not doing anything sketchy. I'm just recomposing my frame. So for me, it's communication. It's walking them through every step of the process. It's managing expectations and letting them know what they will get as opposed to what they want.
Yeah.
And the one, to this day, still the one big thing that I get confused on or I lose clients on is when it comes to licensing images, especially for musicians. Like I say, okay, well, the price includes the shoot and the processing stuff. And then, it depends on what you want to use it for. Sure. And they're like, well, just give me the images. And it's just like, well, no, so usually when I work with musicians, I'll do a session. Yeah. And then what I do is I do a whole little series of tiny mock-ups. Like I'll do, here's what it looks like as a Facebook banner. And here's what it would look like as little square album covers. And here's what it would look like. Because you give them the images and then they're like, well, what the hell did I do with them? So, if we're shooting on a white background, we can stretch that white out and make a 13 by 19 poster and leave negative space so you can drop in all the gig dates and everything. And they're like, oh my God, that's fantastic. But the licensing thing to this day, I still have issues with. And it's like, this is good for you. This is good for if you want to press CDs. If Red Bull decides they want to sponsor you on a world tour or whatever, you got to send Red Bull to me because these images are non-transferable. So you can't give these to Red Bull. And I've had clients walk away on that kind of. I had one guy one time who came in and I don't know if he was just trolling or whatever, but he said he was a musician. He wanted to discuss with me. When we got to the licensing thing, he goes, well, I don't understand why you don't want to give me the images. He goes, the way that you have it set up is if I was a plumber and I installed a toilet in your house and then I charged you a per flush fee.
But you're not making money on those flushes.
Right. And I'm just different.
Like, sorry, bro.
I was just like, I kind of want to get into this discussion, but at the same time, I don't want to. Right. I'm like, I don't know. Like, this is not going to work. Yeah.
It's not worth your time to argue with him over some.
But it's still like, I can still see, like you start talking about licensing and all of a sudden, like their eyes start to go dark and you're just like, oh my God, how do I? So everyone, and most of the time they kind of get it.
Sure.
But every once in a while I deal with somebody and they're just like, I don't understand that at all. Like,
I think a big part of what we do and my community of fellow freelancers, I'm a musician as well. So I've got producer friends, I've got session player friends, all kinds of different people in my community that are creative. And we constantly are talking about how half of our job is educating our clients on what it is that we do, how we do it, why we do it, and like, what's it all for, and I think, to go back to your point, I think communication is extremely important because that's the only way that we can educate people on how this process works, no matter what kind of freelancer you are. I think it's important that you communicate and keep that open dialogue. And going back to what you were talking about kind of like disengaging people and making them feel comfortable and safe in the environment that they're in. I think another thing about being a photographer or somebody with a camera, videographer, it doesn't matter what you do, but if you've got a camera, you have to remember that lens is like a giant eyeball, and you got to go back to like nature photographers. Like they hide behind ghillie suits because a cheetah sees a giant eyeball looking thing. It's going to freak out and run away, So it's like a fight or flight instinct kind of thing to be naturally like afraid of like that big imposing lens. So I think it is important to kind of like make people comfortable and talk them through the process of what's going on and why it's happening that way.
You have to. I've watched students who first couple of times they work with models and the model's standing there and the student gets behind the camera and they're like, okay, now I need you to turn the other way, like turn your head, move and the person's just like, what the Christ do you want me to do? So you've got to, like, you're going to have a really hard time if you can't communicate with people. And I think that's, 50%, maybe even 80%. More important than actually shooting. Like you've got to, like I'm always like any portrait session I do, I always say when the client comes in, you kind of have to fall in love with them just a little tiny bit. Like not like creepy like fall in love.
Romantically, yeah.
But you're just like because like you see them completely. All they see is their faults. They come in and every person that I have on my wall in the display, like they always come in and say the same thing. They're like, oh my God, you got a your hands are going to be full with this. And it's like, not like, like everybody that comes in, I'm like, you're gorgeous. Like you're so used to pointing out your own flaws But so you gotta kind of just fall in love with them a little bit and just be nice to them. Like I don't do one thing I don't do is I don't do like heavy. Like I did headshots for women in the past where, like they had some serious kind of third neck going on and they're like, okay, well, I need you to completely remove that. And I want you to slim. And I'm like, I'm not doing reconstructive surgery.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I want you to look like when somebody walks into the office to have a meeting with you, I want them to be like, oh, okay, you look like the picture. I don't want to be like, oh my God, like
you look like you got
when did you take this photo? Like 35 years ago? Like,
Yeah.
so I always tell them, like I do, touch-ups and everything, but I'm like, I'm not slimming and getting rid of and, like not cheekbone
I just tell people I don't. I just don't.
No, I just,
don't.
like, as like
you are beautiful the way you are. That's it.
Right. There's nothing wrong with you. And they're like, oh, but I'm terrible.
Like, I gotta, whatever. Like, you're fine, bro. You're fine.
Right. It's like, calm down. Like, don't listen to them.
Yeah, exactly. But I also get it because, like, we're the same way. When we
there's a reason why I am
behind
the camera and not in front of the camera. Like, no, thank you. Oh my God.
Oh my God. So tell me what you're working on next, what you're excited about. And
I'm just finishing up a high school portrait session, which I always get just like friends of family kind of stuff. Sure. So I shot the sister 4 years ago, and then they wanted me to do the son. But again, I told them, I'm like, all right, like I'll make sure I got a nice smiley shot of, them that they're going to use in the yearbook. But I'm like, I want location. They own a little cottage by the water, by the ocean. So I was just like, we just spent a whole day just shooting a bunch of shit. And I brought a backdrop out there with me and I set it up and I did my all kinds of stuff. So I'm doing that. I've been doing a lot of stuff with Levi Redcross, who's on Instagram. He's really into film photography, and he sort of caught the viral stuff with all his interest in film cameras and everything. So I met him 2 years ago. I found him on Instagram. I was just like, oh my God, this dude he's so infectious. His excitement is so I was just like, dude, you're an hour from me, like come up to the studio so we can hang out. So we hit it off, and we've been doing a lot of photographer meetups. Cool. Where once a month we just set a date and a time and people show up, and then whoever strays, we go out and have tacos afterwards. Yeah. And again, it's just building up that community, which is awesome. So we're doing a lot of that. Because of Levi, I've been like bringing my GoPros out more often, and like anytime my wife and I take a road trip, we have a dash cam that we record, and then I do body cam and stuff. And so I've been editing videos together. It's my first time using DaVinci. I'm one of these idiots that used to use just iMovie for like real simple videos, but now I got DaVinci, and I'm like, oh my God, I can actually make stuff do things now instead of just like. So I've been trying to do that. I had a musician I worked with a long time ago that was just like, oh, you need to do video. Let's do videos and stuff. So we did some videos for him, and it was pretty cool. But at the same time, I was like, the amount of raw footage I have is just way so much. So I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna go back to just doing my own little things, and I like doing it because it's like a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So it's like, here's me shooting, and then here's the image that I actually shoot. So those are actually kind of fun. I love doing that stuff. I love
making those types of videos. I just started a separate YouTube channel for like all my BTS of like my photos and stuff. It's so fun to like. Yes. Just have that footage. And I even, I just shot behind the scenes for a music video for a band that I shoot for a lot, toured with them. They've been around for 20 years. They're called the Red Jumpsuit Apparatus.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so
I
they
know
have
that name.
Yeah, so they have new music coming out. They just shot a new music video over the past weekend in California. So I flew out there, filmed behind the scenes for them, and the director is Ronnie, the singer's wife. And she directed the music video, and she did their last music video as well that I also shot BTS on. And she hit me up and was like, hey, you have a bunch of footage of me. Can you make me a director's reel? And I was like, hell yeah. Absolutely. And it was awesome. Cool. So I put it together yesterday, and I texted her. I was like, damn, I wish I had a reel that was this badass. Like, right? Like, not to toot my own horn, but I made you this badass reel. So then I got to start thinking, because I do the same thing. I bring my GoPro with me, set it up on a tripod, talk to it for a second, do the photo shoot. And now I'm like, damn, I need to hire somebody to come shoot behind the scenes.
Right. It becomes a whole thing. It's like this whole separate thing. It's like, social media is awesome, but at the same time, it's such a curse because it's
such a curse.
You've got a constant, and if I take a break, I'll take a break for a couple of months or something, and then I post something, and someone's like, "Oh, I thought you went out of business."
I thought you died.
Shut up! Like,
You're like,
oh my god! Like, it's bad enough I'm trying to do this, and now I feel like I've got to like do this whole rigmarole and entertain people. And
You're not just a photographer. You're not just a musician.
You're everything.
Anymore. You're a content creator. You're marketing. You're fucking. It's a nightmare.
Yes, it is. So yeah, when you run into photographers and they're all frazzled, that's why.
That's why.
They're doing everything from
all the time.
Sweeping the floors to doing all the social media behind the scenes crap.
Yeah. Yep. Man, I gotta start doing some photo meetups because that's how I started, man. In LA, that's how I started. That's how I cut my teeth. And I'm in Nashville now, and I'm like, damn, there's no meetups here. I gotta start doing
Set one up.
Meetups. I'm doing it. I'm putting it on Threads.
Set one up.
Doing it on Threads.
We just went through Nashville for the first time. We went and visited the guy that opened Photo Retro. He moved to Batesville, Arkansas.
Right.
And on our way back, we stopped at that stupid Bass Pro Shop that's got
the big one.
I'm like, what is the dumbest thing? I'm like, why am I looking at a pyramid? It's just full of fishing equipment. Like, this makes no sense.
Listen, the amount of people that have told me that place is abandoned, and I'm like, I think you can go in it. It's like a place.
Yeah, and it's all like it's like a theme park. They all have, it's like the fishing area, and it's like tropical trees. Like all that's missing is like animatronic animals that are like moving. It's so like I guess like that's where like the fishing dudes go when they want to like be like Disneyland for fishing kids. Like
that's so funny. Oh my
But we stopped in. I'd never been in Nashville. We stopped on the main thing
Broadway,
there with all and it was sensory overload.
Oh yeah,
it's
a nightmare.
I mean, every restaurant had open windows, and every open windows it was so many musicians playing, and then like we went around the corner, and I'm like, there's a musician playing at a Taco Bell, and Taco Bell has like this awesome neon lights. I'm like, what is going on?
And you
like,
can get alcohol there. Like, what's going on?
So it was awesome, but it was completely sensory overload. There's so much noise. I was just like, I can't. I'm shutting down.
If you live here in Nashville, like, you detest going to Broadway.
Yeah, is that it? Yeah,
unless you have
tourists.
to, and I have to because like I film a lot of content for musicians, and they're like, let's go to Broadway and film content on Broadway. I'm like, I would rather put a campfire out with my face than go to Broadway. But I also have friends that do the Broadway sessions thing. They play on so the people in the windows that give you sensory overload. They're my friends.
That's awesome.
But yeah, it's definitely a lot. But I mean, as a musician, this is a great place to write music, to record music, and as a videographer, there's not a lot of us here. There's a lot of photographers that say they do videography, and then when they shoot the video, I get the call to fix it.
To help me out.
So.
And you've got Grimey's, which is an incredible record store. So
yeah, we do.
I bought the shirt and a couple of albums there, and I was just like, oh my god. So Grimey's is amazing.
Grimey's is cool. Yeah. So thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your story, your advice. Like you were just such a bundle of joy to have on. I love your personality. Like I feel like outside of this podcast, we would just be the best of friends. So I'm so grateful that you reached out on Threads and connected with me and jumped on here. If people want to connect with you further, ask you any questions, pick your brain, see your website, hire you, let them know.
I am everywhere. Just go to my website. It's sidceaser.com, SIDCEASER.com. I've got Instagram, I've got Flickr, I've got YouTube, I've got Facebook. I'm all over the place.
Perfect.
But yeah, no, definitely. If you got any questions or you want to talk shop or whatever down the road, just ping me. And you can never have too many friends.
Absolutely.
Especially when we're doing this.
Absolutely. Well, guys, that was my podcast with Sid Ceaser Photography. Go check him out on Instagram, on Facebook, on his website, on YouTube. Go check him out everywhere. Support him. He's such a cool guy, and I'm so grateful that he hit me up through Threads. If you are on Threads, use it. It's useful, especially in this community. I am just as shooketh as you might be to hear that. But yeah, very, very excited. I'm excited to have more guests come on here shortly. My winter just opened up, so that means I'm going to dive deeper into podcasting, try to get some new sponsors, and thank you guys for listening. This has been Project Freelance. Get it out there and go shoot something with a camera, please. Stay strong, keep enduring, guys. I'll talk to you soon. Oh, also subscribe, obviously. Obviously subscribe. It helps the podcast grow. And you can leave comments on Spotify now, so definitely leave some comments on Spotify. Thank you. All right, bye.